Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. I'm John Generone, editor-in-chief of IPO Edge. Back for our first Fireside this year, 2023, with a really interesting business. Now, those of you who've watched our program before have seen us work with dozens of green energy companies, but we have not done a whole lot of the nuclear world. So today, for the first time, we're going to be talking about small modular nuclear reactors. We have X Energy, which is going public through a merger with Ares Acquisition Corp. We are fortunate enough to have the CEOs of both of those entities. We've got David Kaplan, who's co-chairman and CEO of Ares Acquisition Corp. He's also co-founder of Ares and chairman of the Ares Private Equity Group. And then we have Clay Sell, who is the CEO of X Energy. You'll meet those gentlemen momentarily. Before we get into that, I'd just like to remind everyone that you're free to ask questions, and we'll get to those towards the end of the program. The easiest way to do that is to put them into your Zoom portal right in front of you there. Alternatively, if you're more comfortable sending an email, we'll keep an eye on that as well. You can send an email to editor@ipo-edge.com. And lastly, if you'd like to watch a replay because you can't catch the whole thing or want to see it again, the full recording will be available for anyone to watch, whether you register just now or not. You can find that most easily on our homepage at ipo-edge.com. You can also find that very easily under the AAC ticker on your Bloomberg terminal or on Yahoo Finance. That'll be up later this afternoon. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to my co-editor, Jarrett Banks, who's going to introduce David Kaplan. Jarrett?
Thanks, John, and welcome, David, to the program. Nice to see you. Let's start off, as we do quite often, by talking to the CEO, yourself, of the SPAC. Can you tell us a little bit about Ares, one of the largest asset managers in the world, and why you chose X Energy?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you both for having us. We're excited to be able to share this story. We really think X Energy is a very exciting investment, and we couldn't be more thrilled to be partnering with Clay and his entire management team. Ares is actually, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary. Ares is, as you mentioned, an alternative asset investment manager with $341 billion of assets under management. And we're in basically 5 different categories of assets: credit, private equity, real estate, what we call secondary solutions, and then a variety of strategic initiatives in which the SPAC resides, actually, along with our insurance business and our Asian footprint. And, Ares takes a very long-term view when it comes to investing. We're very excited about what we think is going to be significant value that we can add to Clay and his management team as they grow the business going forward. And one of the things that we do within that $341 billion is invest in the energy transition. The energy transition, in my view, from a secular or thematic standpoint, is a really exciting place to be deploying capital. There's obviously, the markets are very accepting and desirous of capital formation for the energy transition. We believe very firmly that nuclear is a key component to that transition over the coming multiple decades. And I think we've deployed something like $3.4 billion or so since 2015 in the energy transition, mostly through our infrastructure asset class that resides in our real assets division, if you will. So we're very excited. We think this is a really good marriage and plays to the strengths of Ares management.
Great. Now, we certainly hear a lot about the energy transition, mostly from EV. So this is exciting to get to hear a different component of that. What makes Ares a good partner for X Energy, and are there ways to help the business grow after the deal closes?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because, and I think Clay will probably comment a little bit about how we came together, or maybe some of the attributes that we bring to the table that were attractive to him. Obviously, the SPAC market has gone through a form of correction, which we predicted, actually. And one of the things that we were so focused on when we raised the original capital for this SPAC was identifying a company where we could bring value add to the table and justify the economics attached to the SPAC vehicle. And when you think about the energy transition, that it's global, and you think about Ares's footprint with 30 offices around the world, 17 countries in which we operate, 2,500 employees, and there's literally been, I'd say, several dozen plus of those employees and team members at Ares that have already helped Clay and his management team, whether it's in capital raising, such as the announced investment that took place this week out of Korea from a couple of strategics. We were actually helpful with that. So there's all kinds of things I think we can bring to the table from a business building standpoint that will not stop when we close the deal. Because our mentality, our view, and we're putting up an incremental $75 million off of our balance sheet as part of this transaction, our view and our mentality is very long-term. We're gonna, hopefully really have a great, exciting stock here for the long term that we'll be proud to own.
Okay, great. And what can you tell us about the X Energy management team? What's it been like working with them?
Well, I think hopefully, because this will be somewhat interactive and a bit of, as you call it, a fireside sort of format, I think that you'll see the rapport is actually pretty good. We've definitely become fast friends, and we've been focused on nuclear specifically, and have talked to a number of players in the industry over the multiple years. And so it's from that perspective that we came to the table and built this rapport in a really sort of deep and meaningful way. I think we obviously did tons of diligence on this company. We took our typical private equity approach to diligencing a business to X Energy as part of this business combination. But I think that Clay is one of the most interesting validations, if you will, of the X Energy story. So just by way of background, and I am probably going to embarrass him a little bit because I'm singing his praises, but he was the Deputy Secretary of Energy in the Department of Energy. And so that perch, combined with his private sector business experience, really allowed him to see the entire landscape around the energy ecosystem globally. And I'd say that this technology really resonated with him, and he invested his livelihood in this business. And to me, that's an incredible validation, someone of his caliber and quality to lead this team and execute against a very large addressable market opportunity.
Great. We'll get to Clay here in just a second, but we have a question from the audience that actually is very germane to what I was about to ask, which is how can retail investors participate in the transaction? And we have a question asking if AAC stock will automatically convert to X Energy shares, which the answer is yes.
It's a great question. So Ares Acquisition Corp is traded on the New York Stock Exchange under AAC is the ticker symbol. And if you buy a share of Ares Acquisition Corp and you retain that share and don't redeem as part of the business combination, pro forma for the business combination, you will own a share of X Energy.
All right, let's talk to the man himself. Clay, welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Jared, it's great to be with you and with you, John.
Now, David mentioned a little bit about your background, including your position in George W. Bush's cabinet. What can you tell us about that and your path to X Energy?
I've been in and around the nuclear industry for 25 years. In a previous life, I worked in the White House for President George W. Bush, and then was his Deputy Secretary of Energy in the second term. That was a period of the so-called nuclear renaissance. It was a period of high gas prices. We really thought a lot of plants were going to be built across the United States. I was heavily involved with those policies and as an advocate and an architect on behalf of the administration. Even during that period, though, the most exciting thing, in my opinion, happening around the world on nuclear was in South Africa with a program called the Pebble Bed Modular Reactor. It was a really innovative next generation technology wouldn't melt down, used pebble bed fuel. Commonwealth Edison under Corbin McNeil in the US had invested heavily in it. Westinghouse was behind it. It was a really exciting technology. Well, time passes, things change. I moved to another sector, into the private. The government changed in South Africa and that program ended. And an enterprising entrepreneur from the United States named Cam Gafarian saw the opportunity in high temperature gas cooled pebble bed reactors that could not melt down. He went down to South Africa. He recruited the remnant of the pebble bed team, brought him to the United States, and began X Energy. I later got to know Cam, and when I figured out that that's what he was doing, he was bringing the pebble bed technology to the United States, it really intrigued me, because honestly, I've always believed for a long time that increase in energy demand and the need to decarbonize and the role that energy security played would force economies and producers and consumers to go to nuclear. I mean, I believed that for a long time. I believed it for a long time before the conventional wisdom got to that point. And what was so exciting for me, I joined the company 4 years ago. I saw a commercialization opportunity. And what was so exciting is the conventional wisdom, honestly, has caught up very dramatically in a big way in terms of policy support, customer interest, investor interest, in this belief that, yes, in fact, the world must go nuclear in a very massive way. There's a huge addressable market. I got the opportunity to lead a company that had the technology that I had long believed was the winning technology to the marketplace. And that's why I joined.
All right, that's a great answer. Give us a high-level overview of X Energy and what differentiates you from any other nuclear companies.
Well, the company itself is a designer and developer of high temperature gas cooled reactors. And we are a designer and manufacturer of the fuel, TRISO fuel, I don't know if you can, TRISO fuel form that we use inside these reactors. And you know, our standard a reactor module would produce 80 megawatts electric. It can produce it for electricity purposes. More interesting to the energy transition, it can also produce high temperature steam for the industrial sector. But you know, we're investing heavily in our IP. Our future revenues will be driven by IP licensing revenue, sales of services associated with the development and operation of the plants, and the sale of fuel. So I think we have a really compelling technology, a very strong management team, and a compelling business model that will create a lot of shareholder value, or has the opportunity to create a lot of shareholder value as we take a leadership position into this great energy transition.
All right, great. What
Jared,
yes.
Jared, can I just maybe interject? You know,
Please do.
I mentioned something quickly about the addressable market, and I just would love to maybe put some numbers on that, which is, you know, the opportunity in the US, Canada, and the UK. I think, Clay, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like something in the neighborhood of 470 gigawatts, which translates into what we estimate to be 500 billion of a revenue opportunity by 2040, growing to $1 trillion by 2050. And the validation that this company has received from the Department of Energy through a $1.2 billion award to then go after that market opportunity, I just wanted to weigh in to say, this is a company going after a very large prize with what we think is leading technology, with a world-class management team that has had a lot of validation from third parties, not just Ares, but the Department of Energy being one of them. And I hope that's helpful or additive to your question earlier, Jared.
Those are great points. Yes, absolutely. Clay, can you tell us a little bit about what makes the design safer than traditional nuclear reactors?
Yeah, I mean, first, I got to tell you, Jared, traditional conventional nuclear energy is extraordinarily safe. I would posit that it is the safest generation form that has ever been deployed on a large scale anywhere in the world. And what we have done is we've really taken it to the next level from a safety standpoint. We have designed a reactor that is intrinsically safe. What that really means is the reactor can't melt down, and there's virtually no scenario where radiation will leave the plant site under any scenario and expose the public. So it's a really revolutionary design. It certainly changes the way we engage with the communities in which we operate, which is very gratifying and very satisfying. But the most exciting thing to me is that it really changes the economics of the plant. When you start with a plant that cannot melt down, it changes the amount of concrete that's required, the amount of steel that's required, the number of safety-related backup systems that you have to have in place in order to prevent a meltdown. We have largely eliminated those things. You can think of that as simplifying the design and eliminating a lot of the cost and making it easier and quicker, because of all of our components we're small enough to build the components in the factory. All of those things combined to just make a more economic, more deployable, and more scalable system. And when you listen to the TAM numbers that David laid out, other estimates say we either have to the world has 400 gigawatts of nuclear today. Depending on which study you look at and whether you consider industrial heat in it or not, we need somewhere between 3 to 10 times the existing installed base of nuclear in order to get close to our decarbonization initiatives. So having a technology that is relatively shorter to build and is scalable in a rapid way was I think an intriguing attribute to Ares. And I think it's been an intriguing attribute to the other investors that have come in as they see, kind of the role our technology can play in grabbing a very significant part of the market opportunity.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about who the competition is and how your small modular reactor is different than their designs?
Yeah, I mean, from an electricity standpoint, we certainly compete with fossil fuel generation and even renewables. Renewables are a beautiful resource, but as you know, they're not always on, and the wind's not always blowing. And so every time you see a wind farm or a solar farm, you have to think in your mind, there's also a natural gas plant behind that, firming the power whenever it's not available. So we compete with renewables firmed by natural gas. There's a carbon signature associated with that. There's carbon risk associated with that approach. So we think that makes us quite compelling. We also compete with large nuclear, and there is competition within the nuclear field generally. To me, it's one of the things that's really affirming about the size of the opportunity. A lot of companies have come into it. You have large scale nuclear. You have smaller scale traditional nuclear that still has all of the challenges and limitations of traditional nuclear. And then you have innovative companies like X-Energy. Bill Gates has invested heavily in another advanced nuclear company. So we compete against all of those. The advantage that we have is we are on track because of the customer validation we've received from the Department of Energy, from companies like Dow Chemical, from companies like OPG. We are on track today to be first to the market. And we think that will present a significant advantage. And then our safety case and some of the added functionality that we have make us uniquely attractive to certain industries. And let me give you an example. Our particular technology can produce very high temperature steam.
Mm-hmm.
High temperature steam is a major input to the industrial manufacturing process, like the processes that Dow Chemical uses. That industrial steam today is almost 100% produced by combusting fossil fuels and generating carbon emissions. That's 25% of the globe's carbon emissions. So when you talk about the energy transition, it's not just electric vehicles and transportation and solar and wind and generation. We also have this huge sector, almost equal in size, called industrial heat. It's almost 100% fossil fuel fired. And so the opportunity for X-Energy to come in and provide that high temperature steam is a huge decarbonization and business opportunity. Dow Chemical saw that. They've committed to build a plant with us before 2030 on the US Gulf Coast. They've also invested in the company. So that is, that industrial heat market, or what we call carbon-free steam, is we think will be one of the greatest growth opportunities and one of the key distinguishing characteristics that makes us different from small conventional nuclear power and large nuclear power.
Jared, just on that size point, just visualize this. You have a plant, an industrial oriented plant. It has its fossil fuel fired energy source. You just pluck that out and you put in the XE100 modules in the same footprint. And because of the safety case, because of the physics, basically at its simplest, I'm not a nuclear engineer, but at its simplest form, the physics of the fuel, you don't need to have a containment size around that, and therefore it makes this replacement sale to an industrial company like Dow very, very attractive. And it really has led to a customer pipeline that I think, Clay, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got several 30-ish customers or so in the pipeline.
And it's really dominated by, it's really, there are as many industrial heat steam consumers in that pipeline as there are traditional, utility electric generating customers that you think of for nuclear. So, on that, we think we have a much larger market to address than many of our competitors.
Okay.
And you see how good David and I are together? I mean, we've been doing this for a little bit.
Keep the band together.
Well, there we go.
Now you mentioned solar and wind. What does your footprint look like compared to those kinds of facilities? Obviously, I've driven past wind farms that go on for miles and miles and miles. How does it compare?
All right, let me give you an example. Let's say you need 900 megawatts of capacity. A fairly standard, that would be there would be one 12-unit XE100, and that would cover about 70 acres. And you're going to get 95% power for the next 95% availability for the next 60 years out of 70 acres, tucked in a little valley. It's quite attractive. Or you could cover 40,000 acres with wind turbines. Now, maybe you love looking at wind turbines. I was a wind developer in a previous life. I don't think they're unattractive, but that's not a widely held view. And covering 40,000 really, is quite an impact. If you wanted to do it in solar, it's over 5,000 acres covered in solar panels. One of the issues we've really run into in Canada, and particularly in the American West, with indigenous populations who we endeavor to work very, very closely with, is their unique appreciation for the land and their particular response to the scarring effect that renewables have, because there's such a much larger land impact from those resources. So it's one of the things that I think is really attractive about nuclear, and it's it's a very dense energy source and a very efficient user of the land.
Great. What about replacement cycles? I think it's about 20 years for a wind farm. How does that compare?
An XE100 plant lasts 60 years. A typical wind farm or a solar farm will last 20 to 25 years. I drew oohs and ahs at a conference last year when I stood up and said, none of the renewable plants that we've built to date, and none of the plants that we'll build in the next 5 years will contribute 1 iota to our 2050 decarbonization initiatives. And it's true. You know, look, it's wonderful technology, but you're going to have to build it 3 times. Build it, take it down, build it again, take it down, build it again, to cover the same amount of time that one nuclear plant runs. And you're seeing the impact of that, you know, in the West as wind farms are coming down. And you see these large landfills being filled with, you know, cut up carbon fiber blades. You know, it's a good reminder that, you know, nothing's 100%. Everything has its challenges. I love wind, but I think there's going to be a massive role for nuclear play to both complement wind and address the energy needs in an attractive way on a go-forward basis.
Great. How does the cost of your SMR compare to other sources of renewable energy?
You know, we think we're going to be very, very attractive. At the nth of a kind, we're estimating, I'm going to use numbers that mean something to me, but then I'll try to put it into layman's context. You know, our nth of a kind costs are $3,600 per kilowatt installed. Okay, you know, what does that mean? It's largely allows us to be competitive to $4 natural gas and a $40 per megawatt hour range. The benefit, though, is there's zero long-term carbon risk to be managed when you go nuclear. And when you factor in the social cost of carbon and the expectations around the carbon risk, you know, nuclear becomes much more attractive than natural gas. And natural gas sets the price of power in most markets in the United States, you know, and so that we think that makes us exceedingly attractive vis-a-vis wind for all the reasons, wind and solar for all the reasons that we've discussed, and against natural gas. So think long-term price in 2020 dollars, roughly low $40 per megawatt hour.
You know, if I could just interject once again, you know, that $1.2 billion that came from the Department of Energy, you know, there's kind of the sea change that happened, frankly, with the Ukraine situation in just the mentality around nuclear. You see some reversals at the government level, internationally, and actually domestically here in the United States as well. But that 1.2 billion was awarded prior to that sea change in mentality. And in addition to it being affirming of X-Energy's position in the market, I actually think it is reflective of the government's viewpoint on this cost of carbon associated with alternatives such as natural gas. There is this recognition that a carbon-free energy source that has this meltdown-proof you know, attribute to it is so important to this energy transition we're undertaking here over the next 30 or 40 years.
That's a great point. It really is a bipartisan issue these days too, isn't it?
It sure is. And, you know, Clay obviously has spent significant, you know, part of his professional life in government, but as part of our diligence as well, we obviously wanted to look at the political landscape. And I think there is universal appeal to this solution as part of the, you know, process that we're undergoing as a global economy and a domestic economy from an energy generation standpoint. And so it's well received on both sides of the aisle here in the US, and I think abroad as well, across the political spectrum.
We've seen that trend globally. I mean, you know, 10 years ago, you would say, you know, the center-right party, the Republicans in the US were more supportive of nuclear, and the center-left, the Democrats, were traditionally more opposed to it. That dynamic has been completely turned upside down. The center-left, the Democrats in the US, are just as enthusiastic for nuclear as the center-right. You see that in the policies that are enacted. It's a little bit for different reasons. I mean, the center-left is more passionate about the role that nuclear must play to decarbonize the economy. But what it has resulted in is the most dramatic macro policy tailwinds I've ever seen. And if I were honest with myself, which I'm prepared to be with you, even 3 years ago, I would not have expected the level of policy support we've received. Let me give you an example. The Inflation Reduction Act, whether you agree, whether you think it's accurately named or not, was one of the most significant and richest support packages for nuclear power that has ever been passed. It provides investment tax credits up to 50% payable in cash at commissioning. It provides production tax credits that can be the equivalent of 830 million over the first 10 years of operation of an XE100 plant. What's so interesting about the richest nuclear incentive package that's ever been passed? It was passed with 100% Democrat votes. Not because Republicans don't support nuclear power, but because that, the nature of the politics in town, that's what was required to get it done. And it's still, even with only Democrats voting for it, it was still the most significant nuclear legislation that's been passed in a long, long time. And that speaks volumes about the path to becoming a bipartisan darling that nuclear has been on over the last 3 years.
Eye-opening indeed. When can we expect to see the first XE100?
You should expect to see, because I expect to see, and our customers expect to see, and our supply chain expects to see, the first reactor come fully online in the 2029 timeframe. One of the first unit will probably come online in 28. But we have a number of customers that are pushing on that timeline, and we have a good approach to get there.
Okay, can you talk us through some of the milestones that we're going to see over the next few years?
Well, you can anticipate, to get on that pathway, we'll make our construction permit application to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission towards the end of this year. And then, it'll be a few years to review that, get it approved. Then, construction is about 3 years per unit on a staggered basis thereafter. So it really puts us in the 28-29 timeframe. But it's not just the reactor piece.
I think Clay froze. That's all right. David, maybe we'll ask you about the current amount of customers and how many more are in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think so. I think what the company has publicly disclosed is 30 customers. And again, I really would emphasize the point that we were discussing earlier about the addressable market, including industrial. And it really is this high temperature steam that Clay was referring to that opens up a whole, different and differentiated segment to go after. So it's very good for business development going forward.
All right, great. What is X Energy's path to profitability?
So the revenue model, so you asked the question regarding when the first plant will be, sort of up and running. Revenue is, and there's disclosure on this that you can find, I think, on the AAC website. So feel free to, for those listeners to go look at this more carefully. But revenue comes just given the business model, the profit model for the company being services driven, asset light. Revenue comes in years before the plant is actually commissioned up and live. And then post the plant being up and live, there is a long-term, and we talked about the useful life of the XE100 being 60 years. I think of it as a bit of a razor blade model, printer cartridge model. They're going to be selling fuel. And the company actually has broken ground in Tennessee on the first commercial nuclear fuel plant to be built in this country, I think in something like 50 years. And so when you put all that together, you can look at a unit of profitability as an XE100 sale with revenue starting before and continuing for quite a bit of time after.
All right, great. In your mind, why was now the right time to take X Energy public?
Well, I see that Clay has returned.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think
Um,
let's get him back. That was a good question for David. But let's
There he
just get
is.
back to some of the technical stuff with Clay if we can.
Yeah, I apologize. We lost. I'm at my home in Dallas, Texas. We just lost power, and so I'm coming to you. The show must go on. I'm coming to you
Well,
via
so-
my phone.
So Clay, I think, did this on purpose, John and Jared, just to show that we need a more reliable source of energy, and that fourth generation advanced nuclear reactors like the XE100 are just the answer. So
That's
this was
great.
a very dramatic demonstration.
Thank you, David, for the great assist. That's what I was doing.
Okay, sounds good. So do you want to talk, Jared, do you want to just talk quickly about the why? So Clay, I don't know if you want to weigh in from the company's perspective. Why now? Why now? Why go public? And I'm happy to talk about that as well, just from my capital markets.
Well, why don't I'll address it from the company standpoint. And it was, we knew based on the scale of opportunities and the desire of our customers to move even faster, we knew that we needed to eventually get to the public markets. We thought it was important in terms of access to capital. We thought it was important in terms of our ability to be, the quality of counterparty to large institutions that they would expect and require in terms of, the performance guarantees that we need to offer. So we always knew that this was our destiny. It was really, when we met Ares, it was, we had a really good summer. We had made customer announcements with OPG and with Dow Chemical. Then the Inflation Reduction Act had passed, and we had a lot of interest from some really compelling SPACs. But David and I hit it off from a values and just friendship standpoint from the beginning. Ares was a premium class investor with an impeccable reputation and a global footprint, and a reputation as a great business builder. So that was something very interesting to me. We were able to drive attractive terms because, quite frankly, there were more SPACs looking for deals than there were high quality targets. So we were able, I think, use that to the advantage of the existing shareholders. And we were able to work a deal that was exceedingly attractive to us. Part of it, of course, was the addition of Ares putting, capital off their balance sheet of $75 million, directly into the company. So really, David was the partner that I wanted to have in building the company. Ares was the partner X Energy sought to have in building the company. And we're really excited to give the public investing market an opportunity to take a pure play, investment in the energy transition with advanced nuclear. And we thought ultimately this was the right time to do it. Even with the reality around the SPAC market, as David says, and I believe, not all SPACs are created equal. Ares is a unique player in this space, and it's one that we're happy to be with.
All right, David.
Yeah, the only thing I'd really add to that, and I actually took our first company public in 1995, so been at this almost 30 years, and Ares itself obviously is a public company since early or spring of 2014, so going on 9 years now. By being public, you obviously have the access to capital that brings. And there's this inflection point right now happening in nuclear. So that marrying that up in terms of the access of capital and the inflection point in the backdrop for the company's opportunity set is a very good thing. But the global opportunity set for X-Energy and having a brand and having the discipline and the transparency that comes from running a better business by being public. Now, you can look at SpaceX and say, oh my gosh, that is a company that innovated something similar, not just that their X is in the name, but similar to, I think, somewhat of the opportunity set in front of X-Energy of innovating, and they've done it privately. But I do believe when you're dealing with government entities and large corporations on the industrial side, et cetera, having that public brand and being public, very helpful. And we've experienced that ourselves in our public company stewardship lives ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. We're going to move into the Q&A portion of the broadcast, and I'm going to pass the baton back to my colleague, John. Take it away, John.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Jared. And Clay, good to have you back here. Sorry about the power outage. I'm going to try to, we've had so many questions come in. We actually had more content to cover, so I'm going to try to condense a couple if I can. These are somewhat technical, but let's try to keep it in layman's terms if we can. Clay, so there's a lot of questions about the pebble bed technology. And something I was going to ask you was something that came up. You use something like 95% less concrete than would be used in a traditional facility. Explain to me about, the disposal and how that works a little bit, because people are very curious about how that works.
Yeah, it's something that's really unique. The containment, which you traditionally associate with large nuclear, that concrete dome, for us, the containment, that role is actually played by the fuel. We use uranium, a unique uranium chemistry enriched to 15.5%. And then we encase that uranium in layers of graphite and ceramics. And so you have a robust form that cannot melt down under any scenario that it would ever see. And it retains virtually all, 99.999% of all of the waste produced during burnup. And so the Department of Energy saw this, and years ago they said, this is the most robust nuclear fuel form that's ever been invented. So that is a key component to the intrinsic safety of the reactor, which has a self-regulating core design that if it happens to heat up, it shuts down the chain reaction automatically and cools back down. So again, those features operate together to have a enormously safer plant with less risk or no risk of a meltdown. And so just, the steel and concrete in a traditional plant can just be removed. It's no longer required by virtue of the safety case. That's the best way to think about the benefit.
John, something that I always remember in all of our discussions around diligence, we brought in all of our technical advisors, et cetera, you could drop the fuel into a volcano and it won't melt down, just at that temperature, just to, sort of contextualize the safety case. And that's why it fits within this small footprint, and therefore the addressable market is as large as it is.
It makes a lot of sense. Something else that I wanted to ask quickly here is vertical integration and how that's important to the production model, Clay.
Yeah, we saw the opportunity to get into fuel, about 6 years ago. There was not an existing TRISO fuel manufacturer in the US at that time. And so we saw an opportunity to, quite frankly, get into a business that we believed in and that we believed would be very large. We saw an opportunity when we had a desire to control quality and to control supply for our future customers. And just, from the economics of it, a typical 4-unit, 320 megawatt plant, the initial core load, that's a $40 to $50 million initial fuel load. And then, it's about $10 million a year thereafter. So it's going to be a really attractive recurring revenue business for us. And it also, we just so happen to have the leading TRISO fuel expert in the world in our company, a guy named Dr. Pete Papano. He did a lot of the work in qualifying this fuel form for the Department of Energy and Oak Ridge National Lab, in the previous decade. And we got him to join X Energy. It's part of our great tradition of attracting extraordinary talent. And quite frankly, we built the fuel business around him and the outstanding team he assembled.
Great. This is a good question here, which is something that's explained, I think, in good detail in your deck. But can you tell us about the capital you raised prior to this and what that was directed to? It's not as if this company was just born yesterday. I think you were started 2009 or so, and there's been a lot of work done since then, and a lot of capital deployed in the meantime.
Yeah, we were fortunate to have an amazing founder in Cam Gafarian. He put between debt and equity roughly the first 100 million into the company. And then we were extraordinarily successful in winning competitive grants from the US government. In total, we've won about 1.4 billion in federal grants that have come direct to the company or will come direct. Some of them are still flowing that way. And so that's an extraordinary relationship. It really, you can think of that money coming in as non-dilutive equity. And we still retain all of the intellectual property that we are producing with that. And then over the course of the last 2.5 years, we've gone out to other private investors. We had a successful B round raise in 2021. And then we've raised, almost 200 million, 60 million earlier this year and about 150 million associated with our entry associated with the SPAC transaction. And so we are, our success there combined with our partnership with Ares and the prospects of securing additional cash in the transaction, it's really an opportunity to financially de-risk the company and accelerate some of our growth initiatives over the course of the next couple of years.
John, just given the nature of the ownership structure and management, quality of management here, they've been very good stewards of capital, very efficient with the deployment of capital is one point I'd make. The second, just on this, because great question, by the way, is if you look at not all strategic investors are great, but not all strategics are looking at it from the same perspective. And I think what's most notable about a couple of the strategics that have come into X Energy with investments prior to now is their customers and their prospective customers. And so that's just that little extra validation, if you will, on the product and the market opportunity here for X Energy, because, it's a little different than, say, a supplier to X Energy, as valuable as that is, because that's an important collaboration, again, in terms of execution. But those customer validation points, I think, are really, really notable.
Yeah, that's helpful, David. Thank you. We had something that David jumped into a bit about your customer pipeline. I'm going to wrap this again into another question, which is an interesting one. Tell us a bit about the profile of the customers in your pipeline. And then someone asked, thinking way outside the box, perhaps, are there opportunities in space? Have you thought about working with NASA or the Department of Defense? This is probably good for Clay.
Can I start with the space one because it's so exciting? Yes. In fact, well, I'll tell you, our core business is our commercial business, but we have a lot of expertise in fuels and in reactor design that, quite frankly, is highly attractive to the government. And so for example, we have a contract right now to do a conceptual design of a power grid on the moon that would allow a permanent human habitation on the moon to survive the solar night. And the only way you can do that is with a fission surface power system that would be remotely deployed and constructed. We won a contract last year from NASA to do that work. We've done a lot of design work on, for example, nuclear thermal propulsion systems that will be required to take humans to Mars. Just because you have to shorten the time, you need the speed that you get from a nuclear powered rocket. And then, of course, not in space, but the Department of Defense selected us a couple of years ago to design a micro mobile reactor for the military. Again, it's important to what we do from an innovation standpoint. It's important from what we do from an R&D standpoint. I think investors should see these things as extraordinary validation of our technical chops in design and in field work. I was so excited by the space part, I forgot the first half of your question.
Oh, well, I think I was trying to wrap them together and ask, what does the profile of your current pipeline look like? And then, I was thinking that was so far out, it might be maybe someday, but to tell us about who's, coming up in the near future.
Yeah, we've chose to focus early on in three principal markets, the US, Canada, and the UK. Those are three of the generally regarded 5 top regulators. And so, in some ways, it's a regulatory hedge strategy, and that success in one will result in success in other markets that are attractive. I think Canada, for a lot of reasons, is one of the most attractive commercial markets for nuclear today. It's why we wanted to partner with Ontario Power Gen. It's why we're so pleased that they are both a prospective customer and an investor. And then, the UK has made, particularly in the aftermath of Russia's invasion to Ukraine and the vulnerability now represented by overdependence on Russian gas, they have accelerated their nuclear policies in the UK. They have identified our exact technology as the preferred technology for industrial heat and hydrogen. So we have a number of strategies with customers underway there. And then in the US, we have strong interest from utilities, but extraordinary interest from the petrochemical sector and industrial customers. The only one that we have announced to date is Dow Chemical, but they are representative of the great interest in carbon-free steam that X-Energy can provide.
Great. A quick question on uranium, and if I might just slip this little anecdote in from my personal side. My grandfather's a nuclear physicist, and I have a picture of him with Edgar Sengier, who was, mining uranium out of the Belgian Congo in the 40s. Where does it come from now, and is it hard to get?
The Earth's crust is awash in uranium. The biggest suppliers, U.S. has a tremendous amount of uranium resources here. It's largely not mined today because more commercial resources are in place in wonderful allies of ours. So most of the uranium in the world today comes from Canada, Australia, and Kazakhstan. And they are the top 3 producers. And so we have, a diversity of supply. The issue, no issues associated with the global uranium supplies.
Great. I want to ask about some news from December, a recent announcement that you guys made about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission accepting an application. Can you tell us a bit about that? That's for the first ever fuel fabrication facility focused on the use of high-assay, low-enriched uranium. Just tell us a bit about what that announcement's about.
Yeah, there are 3 commercial fuel fabrication facilities in the United States today, but they're all for conventional, traditional nuclear power plants. And so we have filed an application to build the first commercial advanced fuel manufacturing facility to make the TRISO fuel. We're going to do it in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We made that application in April. This fall, the NRC notified us that they had fully accepted it. We're now in a 2-year confirmatory review process. And that ultimately what comes at the end of that is a license to handle material up to 20% enrichment. We'll get that license, and our fuel facility will go commercial around late 25. And it will be, again, the first high assay, low enriched uranium advanced fuel facility in the world. We're very pleased to bring it to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and it will be the fuel source for all of our early customers of XE100s.
Can we ask about the geography of where your customers are? I think there are plenty of countries out there that are very comfortable, in East Asia, for instance, with nuclear power. Something that's come up in the past when we've been talking to companies in the space industry is, national security issues. Is there anything to worry about there? Or are you able to sell to, the vast majority of the countries around the world?
Yeah, it's a heavily regulated area. We can only trade with countries that have specific treaty agreements with the United States. In our parlance, they're called Section 123 countries. We can only have discussions with countries that are authorized and approved. That's a huge swath of the available market. So we don't assess a lot of risk of that. I mentioned our initial markets that we're focused on. We have a number of fast following markets. So, not this year or next year, but in the years following, we have opportunities in Eastern Europe and we have opportunities in Southeast Asia. We announced an investment from DLE&C, one of the largest constructors in Korea, specifically because they saw an opportunity to be a co-developer of plants, bringing this technology to markets in Southeast Asia. So it's the global market will come very quickly. Again, it's one of the reasons that we were so game to partner with Ares. David has a Korean speaking professional, in their offices over there that was, proved to be very, very valuable. And, with a partner like Ares, we're within 1 or 2 degrees of separation from every single decision maker that we will want to engage with for the next 20 years. And that's worth a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And that's something we touched on earlier with David, but good to hear your perspective on that. We're running out of time here, but something that David mentioned earlier, which was mind blowing, was the total addressable market. I mean, almost hard to get your head around the size of these numbers. For investors, you're going to be first to market, but is there enough opportunity out there that even if there are other companies that go after this, there's still plenty for everybody? How should investors look at that?
The investors should expect that there will be multiple winners. The size of the opportunity is so large, it has to be that way. We think we have the team, the technology, and the partners to be a disproportionate winner. That's what I'm focused on. But there are going to be many winners. We work very collaboratively with our colleagues in the industry. In many respects, we all use aspects of the same supply chain. And so, the entire industry needs to come up together, and it's big enough for many. We just aspire to be the disproportionate winner.
All right. Well, we've only got a minute or two left here. What I'd like to do, since we've covered so much, is give you two a chance to tell me if there's anything we've missed, or if not, what are you most excited about this year? Obviously, taking the company public, but what are you thinking about most? What's in your mind here? And we'll start with you, Clay. Aside from going public,
what I'm most excited about is, I've talked about, there's kind of 3 big shakeouts in our industry. First, you have to raise roughly $1 billion to get your products to the marketplace. I'm going to put that in the in-hand category. Then you have to get premium class customers to select your technology, and all of those processes are competitive, and they need to pick you instead of someone else, and you need to get a real project going. And we've checked the box there. The third thing, and the most exciting thing to me, is how we use our technology and our team to deliver this first project approximately on time, approximately on budget. Let's be honest. The nuclear industry of late, if you look at the Westinghouse Southern Nuclear Project down in Georgia, it's not been a great story for our industry in terms of on time, on budget performance. We think there are a lot of things about our technology, building our components all in a factory, shipping them to site, reducing the amount of steel, reducing the amount of cabling, reducing our exposure to the nuclear regulated supply chain where you have to buy the safety related equipment. We just have less of that. There are a number of things about our technology that we think will allow us to break the conundrum of nuclear construction. We've invested heavily in a team of experts, many that came from the Baraka project in the United Arab Emirates, which is arguably the most successful Western related or Western oriented new nuclear construction project in the last 40 years. A lot of those folks are on our team at X Energy. So the thing that excites me the most is the intense focus we are applying to that, because we know and we believe that when we do that, deliver the first projects approximately on time, approximately on budget, we have set ourselves up to create massive impact for good around the globe, massive shareholder value, and quite frankly, be part of creating a company that is truly great. And all 400 of the employees that work with us at X Energy, and all 500 of our full-time equivalent contractors that work with us in the design are excited and motivated about this opportunity to create a truly great company with a massive impact on the globe. Honestly, that's what gets every one of us up every single day. That is the source of my excitement.
Well, thank you for that, David. It's going to be hard to top that, but if you got any parting thoughts, I'll let you sneak one in here before we wrap.
He just stole my line. I mean, we spent 99% of this talking about the business opportunity. That, last point that Clay just made, just this company can be a force for good, and really safe, secure, clean, and affordable energy is the holy grail. And I think X Energy is going to be a big part of that, for generations to come. So that's what's so exciting to me.
All right. Well, that's perfect. Everyone, I just want to remind you, thank you for tuning in. The replay will be up on IPO-edge.com, or just look up the AAC ticker on Yahoo Finance or Bloomberg Terminal. You'll find it there. David and Clay, this is a real treat. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to have you back again soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jared. Thank you, David.
All right.
Bye.